It's time for Rise, Repeat, or Retreat. We've been doing this for all the divisions. We're going to go through every division, all 32 teams. And C-Rob gets the bad division. Story gets a good one. So now that we have Jori, we can do a good division. This is the way it goes. C-Rob complains every time about the division placement, Jori. So just know that this proves you're our favorite.
I think the most impressive part of Rise, Repeat, and Retreat is that if I were hosting the show, I would mess it up every single time because it's such a tongue twister. And somehow you repeatedly get it right, Fitz. So, this is why you're hosting. Just lots of kudos to you.
Look at that. All right. We're going to take a look at the vaunted NFC North. And here's what we're going to decide. If you're new to the routine here, we're going to figure out based on where we were a year ago today versus where we are now, are we the same with these teams? Are we higher on these teams, or are we lower on these teams? So based a year ago right now, what was our thought process on the Detroit Lions versus where it is today? We'll start with the top of the division, Frank, because the Lions 15-2 last year, they were a darling last year going into the year. They are still in the eyes of some a darling. Are you rise, repeat, or retreat on the Detroit Lions?
I hate this so much because I'm rooting for the story of the Lions becoming a Super Bowl champion. I think it would be incredible, but I do have to say retreat. I just think it's, look, I picked them to win a Super Bowl last year, and they were certainly a Super Bowl contender. Obviously had the disappointment in the playoffs with all the injuries. And I get the optimism of, well, all these, you're not going to have that many injuries again. Aiden Hutchinson comes back, et cetera, et cetera. But I just look at the Lions. Again, we talk about this all the time, Fitz. We underrate losing coordinators. There was a reason Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn were two of the 3 or 4 highest candidates in the pecking order when the coaching carousel came around. These are good coaches, really, really good coaches. Ben Johnson is an offensive genius. Aaron Glenn was holding that defense together with Scotch tape by the end of the year. Really impressive for him. To lose both guys in one offseason is massive. And we don't talk about offensive line a lot, but that Frank Ragnow retirement I thought was pretty bad for the Lions. He was a special player. Pro Football Focus's number 2 graded center last year. You combine that with the loss of guard Kevin Zeitler, who was at a really good season for them last year. You've lost 2/3 of your offensive line now in the interior. That's tough. Does that mean the rushing lanes aren't quite there for Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery anymore? It might. I don't think the Lions are taking a huge fall or anything, but for a team that was 15-2, just this erosion of, okay, your offensive line's not quite as good. Your offensive play calling's not quite as good. Your defensive leadership's not quite as good. Everybody's a year older. You're getting a little unluckier with the schedule being tougher. It just erodes a little bit to where you're obviously not repeating 15-2. That's way too much to ask. But then you ask, is this a team that can even get the 1 seed in the NFC? I think right now my answer is no. I want it to happen because I really don't want the Lions, this whole era, to end with man, if we only held that lead at San Francisco in the NFC Championship, what if we didn't come out flat against the Commanders in the divisional round when we were 15-2? I want this for the Lions, but I think this is a less effective version of the Lions we're going to see this year.
Yeah, the reason that the Lions' playoff loss was so heartbreaking to the city was not only because of how long it had been since the Lions had looked this good and had this much potential, but also because they knew that the gang was not getting back together. As Frank said, you're losing your coordinators, you're losing some of the players, some of their veterans who are retiring. And I think that just repeatedly you see that. We were talking a few minutes ago about the Commanders and how the Commanders are returning that entire coaching staff. And that's one of the reasons I think that they have the ability to play really strongly again, even if the record doesn't reflect it. But the Lions have lost so many pieces that it's going to take some time to adjust. Now, I do think in the next 2 to 3 years, Dan Campbell will be able to get them back. I think that he's totally exceeded expectations before. He knows how to develop not only his players, but also his staff. But I think this year, there's just going to be a lot for them to get past. The one counter argument to that, I would say, would be they were so injured last year that if they have the injury luck swing the other way, perhaps that's something that would be able to help them. But the last counter argument I'll say is one thing that was fascinating to me when I was at the NFL owners meetings a few weeks ago, and they were talking about the playoff seeding proposal. And I believe it was Detroit who introduced it. And this idea of seed based off record within the conference, not based off if you're the division winner. And one of the reasons that some teams were opposed to that is because they said, your schedule is not fully based on how good you are. And some of it's just luck. And so when they said, look at the NFC North, and when they're winning 13, 14, 15 games in that division, but then all of a sudden they're all losing immediately in the playoffs. Why is that? And there are people who say, well, part of that is because they played the AFC South last year and they played the NFC West last year, and neither of those are particularly strong divisions. So I think similarly, you have to realize that this is not a division that's going to have as easy a schedule as they had last year. It was still impressive what they done. Obviously, you never know going into a season what schedules are going to be, but when we look back in retrospect at what those divisions were that they played against, they did have one of the easier schedules in the NFL.
One of our tenets on this show has always been two things can be true, right? So I will say loudly, I still think the Lions are a Super Bowl contender, but they are one of my biggest retreat teams in the entire NFL. Even though I still think they're a Super Bowl contender, they won 15 games last year. And then you look at that very schedule that Jori was just mentioning. In the first 10 weeks alone, they will take on the Packers, the Bears, the Ravens. They'll have to take on the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, the Vikings, the Commanders, and the Eagles. Those are some of their first 10 games. When you actually look at what they've got up against them, I think it's fair to say that with the combination of that schedule and knowing that they're going to be learning somewhat of a new language with the new offensive coordinator, you've got new defensive, all of new positional coaches all over the place because so many people left. I think that while the Lions are still a double-digit win team to me, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Lions win 10 games. And if they win 10 games from 15, that is a massive retreat. So I still think they're a Super Bowl contender in the NFC, but they do not walk through the NFC North in any sort of convincing way to me, which is going to be a bit of a theme. I'm just going to say that now because the Vikings are up next, 14-3. The Vikings with J.J. McCarthy this year. Jori, are you rise, repeat, or retreat on where you were on the Vikings a year ago today?
Can I be really annoying and go to the Packers real quick? Because every one of my assessments hinges on what I told the Packers when I went to visit them. When I went to the Green Bay Packers and I was talking to them about why I felt like there was a lot of reason for optimism, the biggest reason was because of the stability they have, because they are the only team in the division that doesn't have a new quarterback, a new head coach, or new coordinators. You look at Detroit, as we talked about, lost their offensive and defensive coordinators in addition to some of the players retiring. You look at Minnesota, they've got a new quarterback. Well, that takes an adjustment. No, by the way, it's not just a new quarterback. Like, you're not bringing in Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers. You're bringing in a rookie quarterback who has never played in the NFL. And then you look at Chicago and you say, okay, well, you got Caleb Williams. You generally have some of the staff, but you have a pretty significant staff turnover, including a new play caller and head coach in Ben Johnson. So to me, all of this comes back to, and I know we're going to go back to those other teams, the Packers just have this stability and this consistency in terms of returning coaches, returning quarterback, returning coordinators and schemes. And you don't have any full unit needing to learn new things that is going to give them an edge in the decision. We can get back to the Vikings and Bears soon, but I think that is like such an important premise.
So do you make then where are you on the Packers of our three choices? Rise, repeat, or retreat from where you were a year ago? Where are you on the Packers?
Oh, rise. And I think it's because not only because of the relative division ability, but I think also because when you think about what they were dealing with a year ago is, hey, the defense took a step back, but they were in the first year of the coordinator. Jordan Love had these injuries and it was his first big year of the contract. Oh, by the way, because I guess I should still go at the premise here, right, Fitz? Good point. They have Matthew Golden, so they finally have that wide receiver one that they've been missing all these years. Like, I feel like they lost very little. They maintained a lot, which is underrated in that division, and they also gained some key pieces.
And it's funny because I almost view continuity with the Packers as not the best thing. I'm repeat on them. I just think this is who they are. They're a 10, 11 win type of team. They're going to be, win a playoff game, maybe, if they catch the right draw. I don't think this group has a Super Bowl upside. I don't see the true, honest, blue chip players, the MVP candidates, the offensive player of the year candidates, the defensive player of the year candidates. I think they have a lot of very good players. And that's great. And there's nothing wrong with the way the Packers are constructed. They're very young. As you said, everything's back this year. But I don't see where the improvement comes from necessarily. Yes, a young team could get better. I understand that. But I just don't know if they can improve enough to be a Super Bowl type team. And maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Jordan Love kind of plays like he did 2 years ago rather than what he played last year, a lot of last year. I think the Packers would accept that and that would raise their ceiling a little bit. But I just look at continuity as they're just the same. And what has changed? Is Matthew Golden that big of a difference maker? I really don't think so. We'll see. Again, there's nothing wrong with the Packers being who they are. They're a very, very good football team. They have a lot of very good football players, but I just don't see the Super Bowl ceiling with this group. And that's why I'm just kind of a repeat. I think this is going to be who the Packers are the next few years. And it's going to be tough for them to kind of, again, raise their ceiling to be that Super Bowl type contender.
But Frank, I would ask you is when you say that they're very good rather than elite blue chip players, do you feel like the Lions had blue chip elite players last year? I mean, maybe Aiden
Yes.
Hutchinson before he got injured.
Penny
List
Sewell,
me.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, I thought their whole offensive line basically was elite, and I just don't. What about the Packers stands out to you? I guess I would ask you if you're saying, okay, this is how the Packers win a championship. How? What's their strength? What do they do better than everybody else? We saw them against the Philadelphia Eagles. I can tell you what the Eagles do well. They run the ball like heck with Saquon Barkley, play unbelievable defense. I think the Packers are a top 10-ish defense and probably a top 10-ish offense. Like that's, I guess, it's just what stands out to you about the Packers. They're just good across the board. Again, there's nothing wrong with that.
I think LaFleur and Josh Jacobs. So if I'm conceding to the actual premise here, I wasn't high on the Packers last year coming in. I just wanted to see more from Jordan Love. I didn't think they'd be an 11-win team. I was wrong. So I'm actually rise on the Packers because I think you're right, Frank. They are who they are. I think they're an 11-win team. I think they're just, I think LaFleur and Josh Jacobs, I'm not betting against to be able to get 11 wins out of basically everything. Rinse and repeat. Like they're going to continually be an 11. So weirdly, I think the result will be about what it is last year. But last year, I didn't think they'd be that good. So by definition of the way we approach this, I'm actually rise on the Packers, weirdly, if that makes sense. So then where are we on the Vikings? That's who I was queuing up. But the Vikings 14-3 last year. I'll be honest. I didn't expect the Vikings to be 14-3 last year. I don't expect the Vikings to be 14-3. So like I'm repeat on the Vikings because I thought they'd be good. I didn't think they'd be great, Jori. So where are you on the Vikings?
Yeah, I'm also repeat on the Vikings, but it's a weird repeat because it's like I expect the same things, but not what ultimately happened last year. But a year ago, we did think J.J. McCarthy had a decent chance to start before he got injured and before Sam Darnold became the quarterback. Now you take Sam Darnold out, you still have J.J. McCarthy, but while I want to give Sam Darnold credit for what he did, I still think that Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, that offensive line, the other pieces they have, that fantastic Brian Flores defense, there's so many things around the quarterback that while I still agree that the Packers having quarterback stability, especially if Jordan Love can stay healthy, is one of their advantages relative to the division. I do think that the Vikings have kind of created what we often thought the San Francisco 49ers were a few years ago, which is I think they're a franchise that doesn't need one quarterback to succeed. Now, my question would be I think that gives them a high floor. I don't know how high their ceiling is this year. And so that's why I'm at repeat as opposed to rise.
For me, this is an easy rise. And the Vikings are one of those teams where I think they're being very disrespected. The betting market by a lot of casual fans. What's different about the Vikings this year? Why are they going to be that much worse? The same people who are like,
the
Vikings are going to come.
And they're going to try and have a run-heavy offense, which is going to keep them from actually getting to use Justin Jefferson as much as they can, and he's their best player.
He is, but the same people who are saying the Vikings are going to come crashing back to earth are the same ones saying, well, Sam Darnold's no good. Well, what is it then? Was Sam Darnold just this diamond in the rough superstar, or was he just a guy who ran the offense really, really well? Because I think J.J. McCarthy could be that. Like, yes, we've never seen it. There's no proof of concept, to borrow Fitz's off-used term, but I don't see why J.J. McCarthy is that much worse than Sam Darnold. J.J. McCarthy was a guy they traded up for to draft 10th overall. He's got to stay healthy. That's a big deal. But I don't see why he can't play at a really, really high level, like at least the Sam Darnold level in that offense. He's putting in the time. Everybody's raving about like, yes, he's here to work. He's here to be great. The Vikings improved the middle of their offensive line. They still have Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson didn't play all last season. He's healthy now. I think Brian Flores is a defensive genius too. I don't see why the Vikings fall off as far as everybody else does. I guess McCarthy could just be a bust, but I don't know why we assume that. He looked good in a one preseason game. I get it, one preseason game. But he did look good then. He played really good at Michigan. There's a reason this kid was the 10th pick of the draft. I think the Vikings are going to be good again. Like, what? Maybe not 14 wins good, because that's just hard to repeat. But I don't think they fall off either. I think it's a very good, sound football team that has a very good foundation.
Fitz, can we have some intellectual honesty here? And Frank is like, why does everyone think they're going to come crashing back to ground? As if we thought that they were like massively retreating. We said repeating. We don't think they're falling off. We just don't think they're getting better.
Talking about, I get that, Joe. I'm more talking about the betting market has them as 8.5. They have them as a 500 team. Why?
Well, what did they have them as last year?
It was, it was worse than that. I think it was 7.5. But I
Also,
was just
again,
saying
remember,
from
they're not playing the AFC South and NFC West this year.
Yeah,
true
they do have a
that
juggernaut. Their
their schedule
juggernaut
does get
hits in
tougher.
October. Their juggernaut hits late October because they have the Eagles in consecutive weeks. The Eagles, then at the Chargers, then at the Lions, then the Ravens, then the Bears, then the Packers, then at Seattle, then Washington, then the Cowboys. I mean, that is they got some beef there. Like
I was just gonna say I won't make us do it on the show if we don't want to, but I'm giving Frank homework tonight if not, which is I want you to actually go through the Vikings schedule and see how many wins you would give them as opposed to
All right,
Vegas.
I shall do so because I was always good at homework during my school days. So
I love
I'm sure
I
can
think
fix it.
so.
I think a bunch of these. I'm going to go on record. I think that there is, while the NFC North is, I think, one of the most talented divisions in all of football. I think it comes crashing back to reality this year. Like I know everybody wants to make it what it was last year. I think most of these teams are going to end up between 9 and 11 wins, and that's nothing to shake a stick at. I just think this division takes a step back. The Bears are the one team we haven't done yet. And so this one's tricky because, again, it's where were we a year ago? And y'all, like a year ago, I thought the Bears were a playoff team. I was sitting on this show saying, I'm taking the Bears as everybody was taking the Bears as a wild card team. So I was
Not
pretty high on the
everybody.
Bears last year.
Not everybody.
Not everybody. Yeah, that's fair. A lot of people were taking the Bears. I was pretty high on the Bears. They turned out to really suck. Now I got to suddenly presume that they've fixed all that? No. I'm actually, weirdly, even though the Bears, I think, will be better than they were last year, I'm lower on the Bears today than I was a year ago today. I'm retreat on the Bears till I actually see it. I'm not falling for that. I'm not going to be Charlie Brown running up to that football again, Frank. No, not doing it.
I'm actually Rise. I am falling for it. I'm falling for the latest offseason championship banner they're raising. I thought the Bears had the second best offseason in the entire NFL this year behind the Patriots. I think that they were very self-aware of who they were, what they needed to fix, went out and completely revamped their offensive line, a couple big trades for them. They went in the draft. Ben Johnson got a couple more playmakers with Loveland, with Luther Burden in the second round. I think that really helps. They did add a little bit to the defense, and just the coaching is just night and day. I mean, Matt Eberflus was just so in over his head. Shane Waldron was in over his head. Caleb Williams' dad knew this, right? Like whatever you want to say about Caleb Williams' dad, he was correct about everything. He was right. Like the Bears are where quarterbacks go to die, and I think Ben Johnson can change that narrative. I have the utmost respect for Ben Johnson. We don't know what he is as a head coach yet. I get that, but just as an offensive play caller, how can he not help Caleb Williams? And I'll say this: I hate to go on and on like this about a second-year quarterback because that's really young in your career. But if Caleb Williams doesn't do it this year, if he doesn't show tangible improvement, I think alarm bells should be going off in Chicago that they got the wrong guy. Like, there's no reason for Caleb Williams to have a bad season. None. If he takes 60-some sacks again, that's just who he is. Like, this offensive line is better. The weapons around him are top of the line, and he has a coach who can get the most out of him. I think if his hits for the Bears is going to hit really big, I'm actually very excited to watch the Bears this year and see what they can do. The defense has to come along, but man, this Bears team is going to be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think we should have questions about Caleb Williams because when you talk to people in that organization, there's this sense that because Caleb can make any play, he tries to make any play. If you're a quarterback with some more physical limitations than what Caleb has, you might be a little more realistic, take the checkdowns accordingly. It might allow you to run the offense more efficiently. And so the same way that I believe Aaron Rodgers needs to come to terms with some of his adjusted mobility and athleticism relative to his current age as opposed to 10 years ago. And if he does that, he'll be able to use his mind as a weapon and just beat everyone. I think that Caleb Williams needs to realistically assess which of his skill sets are most helpful in which parts of the games and how often he needs to use them. I think that they can get there, and I think that their ceiling is way higher, but I think the floor should be pretty low. And I don't even mean that rudely, but we've never seen Ben Johnson as a head coach before. We've never seen him balance the entire management of the team in addition to the play calling. He had an incredible offensive line last year. Now, he has invested in the offensive line and he has tried to get some of those pieces. He's got a better quarterback in terms of upside this year than he had last year, but I still think that it could take some time. He's also a very intense personality, and if they start losing early, I think it could spiral. Now, I also think if they win early, that intensity is going to get all of this buy-in, but I could see this. To me, it doesn't go neutrally. This feels like it's going to go in some extreme direction of like fantastic or like yikes, what happened?
Yeah, and I just am always in these situations so hesitant to crown an offensive coordinator as great as he is as a great head coach because it's such a different job. I want Ben Johnson to succeed because he was the flower of this year's hiring class. Like that's the coach that everybody wants. I think you guys make a strong point though, because Ben Johnson was the hire. Anybody else was the hire, Caleb could absolutely survive any sort of a weird season, and it would be, oh, the Bears got it wrong. The Bears went out and got the guy that every team coveted, right? The guy that everybody seemed to want as their head coach. If Caleb isn't great, people are going to look at Caleb and say, yeah, this is not a coaching issue. This is a player issue, and that's going to be heavy. That being said, I really think the Bears have a shot to be a much better football team. Last year I thought they were going to be a playoff team. So I think this whole division looks a lot different this year when it comes to not running away with the NFC, when it comes to the battle for positioning. I think there's a reason that the Lions were the one that proposed the seeding change because they knew they could be on the outside looking in when it came playoff champions, division champions versus wild card. It's going to be hairy. It's hairy every single week as we go through the rest of the division. So if this is the first time checking it out, go to YouTube, check out some of the other divisions we've looked at. We'll get to all of them through the course of the summer. Also, since you've listened this far, rate, review, subscribe. Tell everybody how much you love the show. It helps everything that we do. And follow us all on social media. You know where to find us. We are back every Tuesday. There is no off-season for inside coverage. So be sure you're checking out all the great work that Jori and Frank are doing writing for Yahoo inside the app. Be sure to check out the show every single week. Subscribe. Be sure you're hanging out with us. In the meantime, we appreciate you hanging out with us. Have a great week. Thanks for listening to the show.